Welcome to Below the Line with Dr. Bennie L. Harris. The Chancellor of the University of South Carolina Upstate talks with top leaders about issues such as change, technology, education, and leadership. Please enjoy.
Welcome to Below the Line, a monthly question and answer column in which I have the opportunity to interview an executive, particularly in the Upstate, but also I have opportunity to interview executives from across the Southeast, nationally. But today I'm honored to have Dr. Gail Wilson Awan, President and CEO of the Urban League of the Upstate. Dr. Awan, thank you for being on our podcast.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, I've read a lot about your background to prepare for this particular conversation. So you've described your journey as winding from performing arts aspirations to nonprofit leadership. How did the early background, such as launching the Museum of York County's first Africa Alive celebration, shape your vision for the Urban League of the Upstate?
Winding, that's definitely kind of the trajectory. And I know there are, I guess, some people that are able to do this work or kind of know what they want. And it seems like all the benchmarks are like clear.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That didn't happen. And, I always thought, right, at each one of those stages, I always thought, oh, this is it, right? This is the way I'm supposed to be going. And then something happens and it feels like you're derailed, right? It feels like a setback or what was I thinking? But now looking back, I see that trail was always the trail. So you mentioned the Museum of York County, and I was a student then, sort of a graduate student at Winthrop, and I had this job at the museum. And it's more about the environment.
Okay.
Right. So the museum had this collection of artifacts, of African animals. And, but you're in a space and you look around, and whatever period of time you're there for, right, you ask yourself, well, kind of this, what else can it be? Yeah. What am I contributing?
Right.
What am I contributing? So certainly natural history is an important part, right, of the continent. But then there's also the people and the culture, and that's only half the story. Yeah. So some of the journey is how do we add on to the story that already exists?
And actually, that experience, as I think about the question, and I watch you over the last several years, you've been in this role in the Upstate for what? Your fourth year right now.
4 years, right?
And when you came, one would call you a quiet storm. Literally, because
maybe just a storm. I don't know.
No. You come and you have made a significant impact. You've led the Urban League of the Upstate through very important growth and change. What experiences shaped your leadership style the most?
Well, the Urban League and the University, USC Upstate, we have this common thread, right? Because you all went through a name change. Right. And the original name was
USC University of South Carolina Spartanburg, USCS.
Right. And we were the Greenville Urban League. Okay. Right. But because we had shared leadership, Stockholm was on our board. And when that name change happened, then our leadership said, hey, we'll become the Urban League of the Upstate.
Okay.
So when a leadership decision is made, it may sound simple, like a name change.
Yes.
Right. But the impact of that leadership decision changes everything for generations. Yeah. I mean, we would be doing different work if our
names were,
for institutions,
if I was exclusively focused on Spartanburg and you exclusively focus on Greenville, yes.
Right. So again, so leadership decisions are made. You always look at your predecessors because they always contributed something. There was something of value to contribute. And again, it's how do I add on to that? What does that mean to me? I have different maybe talents or gifts than my predecessors, and I can only do what I can do.
Now, not every institution does a name change well. I have seen some who did not do it very well at all. Universities, Case Western Reserve, when Case Western and Reserve University merged, it was not the best merger, but I've seen some very productive work come out of the Urban League of the Upstate, and it takes leadership to do that. And oftentimes leadership requires making difficult decisions. So how do you balance the heart and the head when leading through those particular challenges?
I probably could do with a little more heart. Some people would say.
I want to dig deeper there. So talk to me about how.
Well, first and foremost, there's those we serve, there's the folks that are directly involved, like employees, but there is always the institution itself.
Exactly.
Right? That is, for me, like another being, another person, and that is truly, truly the one that I feel our head and heart must always be there for, because everything else can change, will change, but when we're in this role, in this seat, that is the North Star. Okay. What is the best decision at this time for this institution that I have the opportunity to serve?
Actually, one of the things I did when I first came here is to help develop some guiding principles for our executive leadership team. And one of the things, the guiding principle we had was several, but one was assume good intent as we work with each other. But the number one was we're going to do what's best for USC Upstate.
Absolutely.
What is best for USC Upstate, which causes me to have to yield what Bennie wants to what does this institution need that's best for that. So for those who may not be familiar, how do you describe the mission and the work of the Urban League of the Upstate?
Well, the Urban League has been around since 1910.
Okay.
Right? We are also a historic civil rights organization. That is who we are. Our role is always to serve those who need us. That's economic stability, right? That's housing, jobs, workforce, advocacy.
Okay.
They may come in different names or show up in different ways since 1910.
Right.
But like you said, those core principles and values will never change, right? So, which is comforting. For me. I mean, I have been in places where it's a little fuzzier and unclear, and it's kind of, whatever is the word of the moment. Right. But we don't have to worry about that because we know who we are and who we are there for.
And I actually appreciate you saying that. I've been affiliated with the Urban League for a while. I was part of the Midwest in Chicago and in Aurora, Illinois. They had several. DeKalb County had a strong Urban League chapter. And I came to understand its civil rights mission, where many civil rights organizations like the NAACP and others focus on social justice. And the Urban League focuses on economic development and economic growth. And how does that play out in today's environment? It was part where they focus on jobs, helping people get jobs, particularly in the urban communities. But today, how does it play out when you focus on civil rights from the term of economic justice or economic environment growth, et cetera?
Well, certainly, when you think of the civil rights era, we were one of the big five, as they call that. Certainly you mentioned NAACP, then Martin Luther King. His platform was in the church, right? That was his audience. That's where he did his work. NAACP were legal issues, of course, and we had the student nonviolent sort of movement. The Urban League, to your point, and this was Whitney M. Young, right? Another leader that said this issue is going to take a multi-prong approach. Okay, the Urban League's mission, as you said, the Urban League's process and the way we were going to do it is that we have to be at the table, right? In order for us to have the largest sort of impact, we have to both. We want to impact policy. That means we have to be close enough and be a trusted sort of thought partner with the folks that are making policy. We were some of the first to have sort of corporate CEOs on the board because workforce development, jobs, education and jobs were so important. So we had to be there when we talked about how do folks get jobs, where are the new jobs, what's the new job opportunity.
Exactly. Right? So, I think about Vernon Jordan, who really, when we look, I don't know if people really appreciate all the work that went on before to reflect on how we live, the opportunities we have. Even me being the first African-American chancellor here at USC Upstate, but Vernon Jordan making sure that there was presence in the boardroom. So I look around now and I see major Fortune 50 companies and Fortune 500 companies, whether it's UPS, Delta Airlines, all of those companies now have diversity on their board, diversity of thought, because they're constituents.
That's right.
They're shareholders, they're consumers, are of all different backgrounds. So that's the type of leadership the Urban League continues to have. Now, can you share with us recent initiatives or success stories that demonstrates the impact of the League's work in the community, the Urban League's work in the community?
In our communities, I think about some of the expansion and the conversation and the vision that you have for what does it mean to be the USC Upstate, right? What the work you do here in Spartanburg County has kind of its look and feel,
right?
But you do serve the entire upstate.
And the upstate of South Carolina, for those of you who don't know, is a 10-county region and South Carolina that we serve as a regional comprehensive university. So
so we have the same. And you mentioned my colleagues like in Chicago, right? The current, my current CEO colleague in Chicago was the mayor of Gary, Indiana.
Yeah.
So she comes from a whole different approach in how she does her work. She brings to it the things that she's excellent at, right? So we do the same within our market, but it is a very different market.
Right, it is very different.
The upstate is a very different. So yes, we have, metropolitan cities like Spartanburg and Greenville, but then we also have our small rural counties, right, that we have to serve. So our initiatives, the way we do our work must be responsive to those markets, those communities, right? Because it's not taking one stamp, right, and said, here you go across 10 counties. So that was a decision, first of all, right? And then we look at the strength and the partners. What do those partners want, expect from an urban league? How do they need to use this resource that we are?
Yeah.
So first you have to find that out, right? And so certainly in Greenville and Anderson, we're very much focused on sort of health and wellness.
Okay.
Right, with our partners there. We actually were also gifted the historic McClaren Medical Shelter, which was the first Black hospital in Greenville at the time of segregation when folks couldn't go to the hospital. Dr. E.E. McClaren built this building next to his house for his clinic. The unique thing about it was it wasn't a doctor's office. It was a hospital that had private rooms instead of everybody being a ward.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, so it's this concept of dignity. He was a businessman because he took $15,000 of his own money and built this a building. So we became the stewards of that property. We're renovating it. Even though the building is small, it's 3,000 square feet. There's nothing architecturally beautiful about it, right? It's a square block building. But, some stories are bigger than the bricks and mortar.
Yeah. So how do you see that building, that property, and the work that you're doing with it today? How do you see it? What does it mean to you personally and to this great mission of the Urban League?
Well, personally, I think, and the Urban League is built on both stories of the history of the African-American experience. Remember, when Dr. McClaren built that building in 1949, that was also the last lynching in Greenville.
Okay.
So think about being a businessman, taking this action to build this clinic when this racial terror is still happening. There's a lot of courage in that. I think that our stories, historically and today, are about, there's always an element of courage. To have vision, you have to have some.
You have to have courage.
Some courage.
Yeah.
Right.
And I appreciate you saying that because, I have the fortune to lead an institution of higher education, and my personal mission is to inspire and develop young people to change the world. And what I hope to do is to instill courage in them, because Dr. McClaren, and so many folks whose shoulders we stand on, did a lot of sacrifice for us to be where we are, for us to see what's possible and to experience what's possible. And so that mission, that work is so real. And I think the stories live on through the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And to thank those that saved the building, right? There's too often our history is just gone.
Exactly.
Right? If you can walk around a city, right? If you erase if you erase what was there, you can very quickly erase who was there.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's part of it.
I find it interesting. This is not a question that we talked about, but I think this is okay. I find it interesting. My wife and I spent some time in Europe on vacation, and the story of Europe and those places where really lived out through the buildings, the historical buildings that are 1,000 years old. You go to Rome and you see all of these Parthenon, all of these different spaces that you in Greece that you're looking at, saying, "Wow, this is the story," and it gives you a sense of connection, or the people there a connection and a purpose to have their stories remembered. And too often we erase those things here because they may have an ugly face to it, they may reflect something, but those stories really make people and make a people resilient, make a community, make a country strong.
That's right.
It gives heritage and purpose to progress and gives a context for progress. So thank you for what you're doing, particularly in that context. We got to preserve
Yes.
our stories and this country because they're so important.
Well, you come from an agricultural sort of family, right? You know, I think about that concept of soil and earth, right? If you, and roots, right? That is what we are rooted in. If we allow that to, like, we have nothing, literally, we have nothing to stand on. And that becomes evident in the choices that are made, the way we live. I think you can look back a lot of our challenges and what we say is problems. How did this happen, right? Because there is no foundation, and who we are is that foundation.
You know, and it's interesting that we're having this conversation in this building at this time. This is the newest building that we have on campus. It's an addition to our library. It's called the Learning Commons. It was investment from our legislators to continue to invest in our students. But as we built this footprint, there were trees here that we had to take down. At USC Upstate being a tree campus, so when you go through this building, you see all of these tree elements. You see the design is about trees, and our success walls has a theme, what grounds us is what grows us. So you have these elements are part of our foundation, and you want to remember them. There were trees here that protected this particular property. How do we remember those trees and utilize them in a very productive way? So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank
That
you
means a
for
lot.
doing that, you know, and it's evident, right? That when you walk into the building, you know, when your students and your team brought me in, I mean, there is a sense of awe. There's a sense of healing. You know, it is academic, but it's also contemporary. There's a sense of movement, but it doesn't feel chaotic. So, you know, even when I was coming over here, you know, I was filled with a lot of sense of pride, and I don't want to get emotional because I do get emotional, but what I felt like for all these students for generations come, you know, I can say, wow, I know the leader that led this. It's kind of, there's an awe feeling about that. So because it didn't have to look this way, it's intentional. It's intentional.
So this is about leadership. So this podcast is about you today. So we got to.
Well, it's all, but what inspires me.
Thank you.
A lot
thank
you talked about a lot of things that inspire me. You know, we came around the same time. You know, we've had conversations.
we did.
I've sent you text about, what do you think about this thing? And you kind of let me know kind of how you are handling some things.
Right. Thank you.
When I was over at the George, you helped me get our office. We had an office at the George, and that allowed me to be around, you know, just other people. Some of the success, some of the things I'm most proud about from the Urban League was because of an environment that was opened up for me, which could have just been an office.
And actually, when I think about some of the current projects that we'll talk about soon that you worked on, you have that ecosystem of collaboration that brought two personalities, two leaders together, invited another leader around your passion, and now we have something great for the county.
Something great.
But before we go there, what role do you believe young professionals can play in shaping the future of an equitable community here in the Upstate?
Well, we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about sort of organic growth and trees. I mean, you know, those are the seeds, and now they're at a certain level. You know, we do so much to get them through high school and then to get them through college, and then what's next? So they are our next, not just our next generation, but I think a lot of times, too often, leaders of a certain age, you know, my age, there's a fear. There's a fear, right? If I give this up, if I give this power up, what happens to me?
Yes.
Right? Instead of the other way around. I'm really proud of the young professionals that we have at the Urban League. In particular, you have Mr. Tierney Bates, of course, who's here on your campus, who also has an Urban League affiliation and background. And I love to see how our young professionals are now here. Right, sharing their stories with kind of this next generation, right? You sort of see this played out, and that is their role as leaders. We had a call with Mark Morial last night, and he was talking about the importance of the YPs, but they already have the young professionals and the guild, right? Those 40 and over. How do we utilize the talent, current talent, and of course, the experienced talent?
So what advice would you give young people, emerging leaders? What advice would you give them?
Well, certainly they all have different skills, different abilities. They need to bring all of that to whatever the opportunity is, because we don't know where it's going to lead, right? We don't know who they're going to meet, who they're going to be an opportunity to help them. And then, most importantly, is in this leadership journey, you learn what you don't know. You learn what you don't know, and what you do with that moment is what determines where you go next.
So it connects an earlier conversation we had early in this podcast, where we talked about particularly the boardroom leadership. And so I have a question here about, can you tell me more about how it's important to be sitting everywhere decisions are made when working with CEOs, corporations to advocate? So when I think about young people and the opportunities we present them, I have seen some of the programs that you have offered here in the Upstate, and to get access to some of the people that you've brought to us is phenomenal. And sometimes our young people are there, whether they host an event with you or greeting folks, aren't connecting that you're in the room where decisions are made. So what advice would you give, and how important is that for them to make those types of connections?
Well, certainly there's follow-up, right? The biggest part of an event or a gathering is like what you do with that moment, right? If you just go, oh, it was over and that was awesome. Well, that's not really leveraging the opportunity, how you follow up with whoever was there, or just almost making that a point. I remember very early, in my career, I always, when I would go to something, I would sit up front. I always knew who was going to be speaking or on the panel, right? And who I needed to connect with, right? Even if it was just that one person.
Now, where did you learn that? How did you are one of the best networkers that I know. So early on in your career, in graduate school, how did you learn that I'm going to see who's going to be here, and how do I need to connect with them? And
maybe from my father.
Okay.
I think my father was more strategic about it. My mom was more organic about it. She had a personality where people just like to be kind of around her. And my father, maybe because of his military background, because I think and maybe also because of the era he was in, he had to be able to read a room.
Okay.
Because it could be dangerous.
Okay.
So it was a different reason for knowing who was in the room, who was an ally, who maybe was not, when to be quiet, when to speak up.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a lot of stuff to think about. It's like you can't just do the work. You've got to do all this preparation, which can be exhausting. We hear people talk about, a lot of women talk about, this is exhausting. It's exhausting before you even walk out the door in the morning.
Yes.
Right? But that kind of comes with it. But I, try to go to things that I'm obviously interested in, some of the work I want to do, who's the one person I can get up to, and then I make a beeline.
Yeah.
I used to be really fanatical. I used to have, chart paper up, literally, and say, here I am, and I need to meet this person. Strategically, how am I going to get there? And it may take me a year.
So really, when you show up, the work has already been done. So, and that's what people have to understand, is that when you show up at an event, when you show up at the table, when you show up at the boardroom, you have done the work. It's kind of like even when you're making public speaking. When you're out there to speak, you're practiced in front of the mirror. You're practiced somewhere else. So when you show up, you're ready. And so for you to have these charts to say, who are the people that I need to connect, because I'm trying to move an agenda over here, that's the work. so that when you show up, there's a lot of clarity about what you need to accomplish.
There's a lot of clarity. Sometimes I know it doesn't look like clarity. You know, sometimes I know it can be perceived as distraction or running around because people may not see it. They don't see what we need to see because they're not looking at the thing we're looking at.
Yeah.
Right. We had an incredible event here on campus.
Talk about that even in that program.
And there was a lot of press. I want to talk about, there was a lot of wonderful press and feedback because it was incredible. But the next day, and I was talking to someone that works with us, a young professional, I said, that's yesterday's news. That has nothing to do with what we need to do next. Right? Because it doesn't end there.
Yeah. Now the work starts.
Now the work starts because it's only, it's only news as long as it's news. But how are you following up?
Yeah.
What does the next 3 years look like?
Now, here's what I noticed. I was watching you at that event here. And we had some celebrities there. And this is I'm talking about an event that you can find online that the Urban League was very pivotal in bringing to Spartanburg to elevate the film industry and bringing personalities and leadership and starting having an organization start around creating the film industry like they have in Atlanta, other places around the Southeast, to doing that here in Spartanburg. But what I watched is that you yield a lot to others. You didn't have to be the first to have the mic. You didn't have to be the last to have the mic or whatever. You didn't have to be on every picture. But you gave a lot to others, and you made sure others felt that they were a part and important to this particular tapestry of activity that was going on. I've seen CEOs, and I've seen people that make sure they have to get in every picture. They have to be the talking point for everything. But I watch you, I'm like, you know what? She's already done the work. She's done the work. This event is here today because of the work that she's already done. So she don't need to get up there and tell. So I'm watching your leadership. And I watch other leaders too, but I watch those things, and often I say, Gail, you want to get in this picture? Oh, no, I got this. I'm like, she's done the work. Tell me about what you're thinking. I know what I was thinking during that time, watching you. What are you thinking?
Well, there's two things. One is that I'm an introvert. Okay.
Okay.
So a lot of that is that.
Okay.
Someone told me I was introvert masquerading as an extrovert.
Okay.
Okay. So sometimes it truly is that. And then I think it's like, when you paint a picture, right? Then you have to get back. The way to look at a picture when you're in an art gallery is not up front.
Okay.
Right?
I like that.
Don't look at a painting like this. You go into an art gallery and you have to step back.
Okay.
Because I have to observe, right? Again, who's interacting with who, what's happening here, what's happening there. This could be a potential distractor, like all those things. So some of it is that I like to separate from that. And then I was sharing with my husband, actually, last week's events, the course of last week's events, I told my husband were probably today the most impactful professional accomplishment, right? Not because of that moment. A lot of it was because of that moment, but like you said, because of what it opens the door to. Right? Now, because there's no going back. Right? You've set the stage. Like, you built this building. You can't just say, okay, we're not going to open. Right? And this thing that's supposed to happen 3 years from now in this building is not going to happen. Right? The stage is set. And that's a pretty awe-inspiring, right?
If you go to the one Spartanburg, which is our local chamber here, it's there. When you go to conversation, I was in an executive committee meeting for the chamber. We talked about it there. So the stage is set for this, as you just stated. And so you're observing the work of all those pieces and I watched you start this about at least 2.5 years, 3 years ago. 3 years ago, you were talking about this in the city.
I was talking about it, and people were like,
and it's still come full circle. That's amazing.
It's great. It's great. I'm really excited about it because, again, we did have celebrities there, and 6 celebrities that I know are going to be passing through here, right? It's changed so much of the Urban League's work. I was telling my friend, this is when you're dealing with a certain group, right? Now it's about, like, you know, someone asked for mangles at midnight. Like, we just have to literally be ready now because we're now kind of the gatekeepers, and we're part of Salt Run, of course, is the business entity. We're the support, we're the workforce. We're there to make sure students have opportunity, workers have opportunities.
And we're talking about Salt Run, which is the organization that's going to lead a lot of this. John Gramley and Charles Wright, who are going to come together, and they will bring these industry, put a business component to them. And I think about all of our students here at USC Upstate who are passionate about film and production and those things. We have opportunities as a result of this work.
And that was the missing piece, right? I can talk about it and want it and envision it, and I thought it was going to happen, and certain things would line up. But when that, you know, when the missing piece of the puzzle comes together, and that was truly when John and Charles met, and John Gramley said, we can do this thing, then you know, right? That's the moment you know, whoa, this thing is really going to happen.
Yeah. So what challenges do you believe we must confront most urgently to ensure that opportunity is accessible to all? To ensure that opportunity is accessible to all. I worry about that every day. We have a great value proposition here at USC Upstate. 99% of our students are either in grad school or in their chosen job within 3 months of graduation. So what are those challenges that we must confront?
Yeah, you know, we are a historic civil rights organization. You know, this is the organization that I'm so grateful to lead. The issues of access, the impact of poverty for generations on folks. It's not, you know, talent isn't enough.
Yeah.
Right? People can have talent, but if you don't have all the other things or support, right, then it goes unrealized, right? And then everybody loses. So policy, again, making sure that we have the relationships and that our organization and our leaders, my board, are, you know, that we are seen as trusted thought leaders, that we can agree to disagree, right? But then find this thing that we agree on because people and lives that we care about are at stake.
Yeah.
Right? Voting rights, those things are just basic things that must be protected. Everyone's, like you said, access to education and housing. You know, now we call those the social determinants of health.
Exactly.
But that was just the work. That is the work. That is civil rights. Right. Housing, education, jobs. So sometimes I think that we use those as divisive things, but that's just what we want for everyone, and everyone doesn't know how to get there. That doesn't mean you should be left out. You can't be left out.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but part of our history, our DNA is about those opportunities to give people the basic rights. Even the way we started as a country, making sure people who had immigrated from Europe had opportunities to grow businesses, to get education, the Enlightenment era, all those type of things. And we forget that. That's how we were founded. That's how we were sustained. That's how we continue to be the great country that we are today. So if you were to leave one piece of advice or encouragement with the next generation of leaders, what would it be?
You know, I am also remembering that today, as we talked about, is also September 11th.
Yeah.
Right? There is violence violence, rage, and anger seen and unseen all around us.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we continue to lead authentically and with passion and compassion?
Yeah.
We don't have the luxury to alienate if it's an opportunity to advance what is best, you know, because like we said, I can't be offended.
Right.
I can't be offended by everything because I have to take the next right step.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not about me. Right?
You know, I appreciate you saying that. And I'm struggling with, I'm looking to write an op-ed. I'm struggling with I'm not going to solve it today, but it's about the power of your voice
Mm-hmm.
to heal, to divide. We're in such a divisive time in our country and in the globe. A lot of nationalism going on. And we have young people who have not developed their ability to discern what they're hearing. They don't have that spirit of discernment. So they hear things, and it may not be intended the way you say it. But what they hear, they take it a certain way. We've had senseless killings and all
That's right.
those type of things.
That's
So I want to really talk to people about the power of voice and the responsibility we have with our voice. What I say and how I say it. Not that I have to agree, but I have to be a steward of peace
Yes.
in what I say and how I say it to get my point across. Because there are a whole bunch of young people who have about 15 seconds, they're going to absorb something on TikTok, on Instagram, and those 15 seconds are going to give them a direction as to how they want to behave or how they're going to respond to their calling. So I got to figure out how to write this in a way that it's not partisan,
Right.
but to let
Right.
people know that you have a
It's not, really, it's
responsibility
not. Yeah,
of what you say and how you say it.
that's right.
We talk about, this whole podcast is about leading below the line.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I mean by that is oftentimes we do not know what's going on beneath the surface when we make decisions, when we speak, or when we lead. How do you see that? How do you lead when you don't always know what's happening below the line of either the people or the communities that you're leading?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly when I think of below the line, which you're right, that's where everything, bulk of it really happens below the line. You have to know where you're going,
Mhm.
right? Then there's an intuitive. You have to be able to, when I say feel what's happening
Yeah.
below, right? You just can't full speed ahead.
Yeah.
Right? If there's a current, if there's rocks, if there's something happening,
Yeah.
right, then you have to stop and pause and say, is this the direction I go? Or is it's telling you something, right? It's telling you something because it can change and shift. That we know will happening. So it's always, where are you going? And is this still the path to get there? And I love what you just said about voice, right? And using your voice. So if you're not always sure, the world is going to be very different 5, 10, 20 years from now than it is right now.
Right.
Right? So if you're going, we want our young adults and our students and our professionals to use their voice. And I think for me, it's like, okay, let us just help you craft what it is that you want to say.
Yeah.
Because you can use your voice and your words, but is it truly what you want to say?
Yeah.
Right?
Voice comes from the same Latin word that calling comes from. And vocare. And what people got to recognize that when I speak, I'm speaking my calling. And is my calling to unite or is it to divide? Is my calling to destroy or is it to build? So what comes out of the mouth, and Scripture talks about this a lot, so I don't want to start preaching, but Scripture talks about this a lot. What comes out of the mouth comes from the heart. So it's amazing that those two words, your calling and your voice, comes from the same root word.
If we connect them.
As you connect, how powerful is that?
I love that. That's it. Okay.
Now, your mother's work portraying an enslaved woman at a historical event seems to have clearly influenced your sense of storytelling and community pride. How does that heritage inform your approach to leadership?
Yes, my mother was an incredible historic reenactor, well-known, well-loved, and she passed away during COVID. Those stories certainly, it was close to her because she could relate. It was a little bit closer to her generation as far as just sort of racial injustice, right?
Yes.
So she brought a lot of her own, being from the South, in Columbus, Georgia. So she brought a lot of that. She studied a great deal. She had such an identity and affinity that people could hear her tell the stories, right? People of all generations from all over the world, and they related it to her as a person, right? It wasn't talking about somebody else,
Yes.
right? So she internalized it. She had so much empathy to the point. I remember when she passed, there were folks from Los Angeles, just folks from all over the world that happened to see her, to come to see her. They could have just been like a show. Could have just been a show, right? But for her, it was more than that.
Yeah.
Therefore, for everybody next to her, it became more than
It was
that.
her calling.
It was her calling,
Yeah, her
right?
voice, yeah.
And so even, and she had dementia sort of at the end, but it's interesting because she identified so much with those characters that really she was that at the end. When I would take her to the Home Depot, if she would get lost, all of a sudden I'd hear someone singing like a Negro spiritual in the middle of the tool aisle. I was like, there's Miss Kitty, But it really, it was such a calling. And what a gift I like to be so clear about who and what you are, again, and what you want to say, what you care about, that there is no question. And she had people that had a completely different thought about slavery.
Yeah.
But somehow people cared about her because she cared about this.
It was authentic.
It was so authentic. And I think
authentic.
we lose that.
So I have one final question.
Yes.
One final question. Do you have a quote or mantra that resonates with you?
I have, yes, I do. I guess there's two I have. One, you had mentioned Vernon Jordan earlier, and Vernon Jordan said something to the effect that, but there comes a time for everyone to give back.
Okay.
And everyone will know that time and that place.
Okay.
Right. There is a time, right? And then sometimes you have this gift where everything lines up, which I feel is for me with the urban, like, oh, well, this is the time when all the winding stuff makes sense. And this is the place. Yeah. Time and place. And then the other one I love is, everyone talks about there's so many problems, there's problems, right? And this quote says something about, in life, there are problems. Choose the problems that are worthy of your life. In life, there's problems.
Choose the problem that
I have to choose because I can't take them all on. But I've got to choose a problem that is worthy of your life.
Yeah. I love that.
Right.
I love that. I'm going to use it again. But thank you. Thank you all for listening. I've enjoyed my time with Dr. Gail Wilson Awan as we talk about Below the Line, the CEO and president of the Urban League of the Upstate. Gail, thank you so much for being here.
Chancellor.
Thank you for listening.
Everything.
Yes, thank you.
The Below the Line podcast is brought to you by the University of South Carolina Upstate. Look for our monthly write-up in Greenville Business Magazine, and for more information, go to uscupstate.edu.